ISIS soldiers are still fighting to win more territory in Iraq and Syria, and their influence is spreading far beyond the Middle East. They're attracting more recruits from around the world, including the United States.
That's right. ISIS is gaining converts who could even launch terrorist strikes here at home. Charlene Aaron brings us the story.
The U.S. and coalition forces continue to bombard ISIS militants in Iraq and Syria, taking out major targets of the terrorist group. ISIS has lost the key city of Tikrit in Iraq, and Iraqi security have made some gains against ISIS in Ramadi. The key is holding those territories. CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck says the U.S. and other world leaders aren't willing to do what it takes to really attack ISIS.
The will is not there. ISIS is not some 800-pound gorilla. Yes, they have some 30 to 40,000 foot soldiers, if not more, in the heart of the Middle East. They control some 35,000 square miles of territory. Yes, they're a formidable force in the Middle East, but they're no match for the might of the United States military or European nations.
Despite the tough battles in Iraq with wins and losses, the influence of ISIS and radical Islam is still scoring victories around the world by making new converts. Here in the U.S., there have been several cases just in the last week. 4 of the 6 men from Minnesota accused of trying to join ISIS have been ordered to stay in jail until their trial. The other 2 defendants will appear in a California court. U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger says they had been making their plans for 10 months.
To be clear, we have a terror recruiting problem in Minnesota. And this case demonstrates how difficult it is to put an end to recruiting here. These are focused men who are intent on joining a terrorist organization by any means possible.
And a 20-year-old woman from Alabama left her family to join ISIS after being recruited on the internet. A South Carolina teenager who plotted to join ISIS and kill American soldiers has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. The 16-year-old planned to rob a gun store near Raleigh, North Carolina, and attack a U.S. military base before traveling to Syria to fight for ISIS. ISIS is gaining recruits and followers in other countries as well. 3 schoolgirls from London have reportedly joined an all-female ISIS militia in Syria. In France, a 24-year-old technology student in Paris was captured this week after he accidentally shot himself. Authorities say he was planning to attack at least one church. A French prosecutor says al-Qaeda and ISIS documents were found in the suspect's apartment. ISIS believes in establishing an Islamic state, a caliphate. And not only is it gaining recruits in the Middle East, but it's also bringing them in from around the world through its videos and internet marketing. And those recruits could join ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And they could also go back to their home countries and launch terrorist attacks, including right here in America. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
The fundamental problem here is we're not recognizing our enemy. We're not recognizing that it's the ideology behind ISIS that's leading to the recruitment. It's not people saying, I suddenly want to be a terrorist. What they're saying is they want to join the caliphate. The head of ISIS has come out and said, I am of the family. I am a direct descendant of Muhammad. And in that, you must pledge allegiance to him. If he announces the caliphate, if he says, I am of the family, then there's a requirement in Islam to pledge allegiance to him. That's why you're seeing this kind of recruitment. That's why Minnesota has a problem with terrorism, is because of the ideology. And until we start facing that ideology, that your concepts about God, if you think you blow yourself up in a public marketplace or you go attack infidels, somehow that's going to get you an entry to heaven, you're wrong. Until we get to that level of dealing with the ideology, we're never going to win this war. It's always going to be some kind of effort to contain or some kind of effort to stop recruiting, and it's never going to work. If the president of Egypt can get up, in recent months he's done this, to get up to say, we have a problem with Islam, well then why can't the president of the United States, why can't presidents in Europe get up and say the same thing? Well, in other news, President Obama has been using drones to attack terrorists, and now the guidelines for those attacks will be reviewed after a strike killed 2 hostages. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Thanks, Gordon. The president is calling for a full review on rules on drone strikes after that attack in Pakistan accidentally killed those 2 hostages. The airstrike happened January 14th. CIA officials say they monitored an al-Qaeda compound in a mountainous region for hundreds of hours and saw no signs of civilians there. But they later learned an American and an Italian aid worker were held captive in that camp and died in the strike.
It is a cruel and bitter truth that in the fog of war generally and our fight against terrorists specifically, mistakes, sometimes deadly mistakes, can occur.
The drone attacks also killed 2 other Americans, Adam Gadon and Ahmed Farouk, a dual U.S.-Pakistani national. They were both al-Qaeda operatives. Well, more controversy for the Clinton Foundation and its relationship with wealthy foreign contributors and a uranium mining deal that could involve U.S. national security. An extensive New York Times investigation reveals millions of dollars flowed from foreign investors to the Clinton Foundation, while Bill Clinton became a partner with one of those investors. The State Department had to approve the deal while Mrs. Clinton was Secretary of State. The Clinton campaign says there's no evidence that Mrs. Clinton supported the foundation's donors while she was leading the State Department. You can find a link to that New York Times article at cbnnews.com. Well, next week, the Supreme Court will hear cases that could determine whether same-sex marriage will become a national legal right. Paul Strand attended a discussion here in Washington where the panelists argued that a ruling for such a right would be wrong.
This panel discussion at the Family Research Council was swimming upstream against conventional thought. That is, it's a foregone conclusion the Supreme Court justices will rule homosexuals have as much of a right to same-sex marriage as heterosexuals do to traditional marriage. But these panelists pointed out there's evidence the justices won't rubber stamp gay marriage.
When the lawyers walk into that courtroom on Tuesday morning, they're going to be walking into a situation where there are 3.5 justices who have said no constitutional right to same-sex marriage and no justices who have said there is a constitutional right.
One of the more interesting propositions brought up at this panel discussion is that maybe the Christians of the world owe it to the homosexuals to point out that their lifestyle is intrinsically wrong.
The faith actually teaches nothing about hatred toward gays and lesbians, in fact, the opposite. But it also says that the behavior is damaging and harmful to your eternal salvation. That's the faith teaching. But they also know from the empirical evidence that the behavior is damaging to your body as well.
Weston argued Christians need to say to gays,
we love you enough to tell you that this is harmful. In fact, we'll even take the hater and bigot label so that we can tell you this because we care about you.
The justices have rolled 4 cases together that will let them decide 2 questions. Must states recognize other states' gay marriages? And does the Constitution require states to allow same-sex marriage? Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Turning to today's edition of Family Entertainment News, a new movie comes out today called Little Boy, about the youngest son of a father who goes off to fight in World War II. The film tells the story of the boy's love for his father and the power of faith. Wendy Griffith talked with the young star who plays the title role.
Yes, I believe it! Pepper is a little boy with a big heart, especially when it comes to his father, who's also his best friend.
It's time to go to bed.
He's a kid who has the biggest love and the biggest faith out of anyone in the entire world. Wow. And his love is centered on his father. And when his father has to go to war, he's just devastated and tries everything in his power to get his father back through faith.
Through his efforts to do the impossible, end a war, and bring his father home, Pepper learns life lessons about God and faith.
You wanted the bottle to move so much. It moved. Your faith is powerful.
But if I get enough faith, nothing's impossible, right?
There's one scene where Pepper is arguing with his older brother and is challenged to move a mountain with his faith. Tell me about that.
Well, he feels challenged, and his father, his love is centered on his father, and he wants to get his father back. And he doesn't want to be humiliated, so he really tries to move that mountain. And he's not the mover of it. God is, but he moved God to move it.
And when it comes to faith, it's something this young actor has in common with his character.
What's next for you, Jacob?
Well, right now, not anything specific, but I know God will provide.
Little Boy debuts in theaters today. You can find out more about the movie, watch more interviews with Jacob, and learn more about his faith at cbnnews.com. Gordon, it's nice to see more family-friendly options out in theaters.
It is nice to see that, John, but I tell you, the Jacob, tell me, Wendy, that didn't seem real. He's 11 years old.
He's 11. He clearly was a little bit younger in the movie because he's definitely grown. You know, at that age, they just sprout right up. But he was so impressive. I felt like I was interviewing a 25-year-old. He was so well-spoken.
So well-spoken, so mature.
This is his first big screen debut, so they are obviously very excited, and we're excited for them.
And he moves a mountain.
And he moves mountains, so you got to see it.